The wealthy family looked down on her at the party. Little did they know the land was hers. Jessica Thompson carefully balanced the tray of canapes as she approached the group of elegantly dressed guests chatting animatedly near the marble fountain. The Worthingtons' engagement party for their daughter was in full swing, and she knew any mistake would lead to more humiliation. That's when she heard Mrs. Eleanor Worthington's shrill voice echo across the garden. The family matriarch discreetly pointed in Jessica's direction while whispering to her richly dressed friends. The words reached the maid's ears like sharp blades. People like her should never set foot in this sacred garden. It's a disgrace seeing that woman walk around here as if she had any right. The shock was so great that Jessica felt her hands tremble. The tray slipped from her fingers and crashed onto the cobblestone ground, scattering the delicate canapes across the perfectly manicured lawn. The metallic clatter echoed through the garden, interrupting conversations and drawing all eyes to her. The laughter started quietly, but soon spread among the guests like a cruel wave. Some pointed openly, others whispered among themselves with malicious smiles. Jessica's face burned with shame as she knelt to pick up the mess. "How clumsy!" exclaimed Brittany Worthington, the bride, already pulling out her phone. "You all have to see this. I'm posting it on my photogram. What wonderful entertainment for our party." Mrs. Eleanor approached with firm steps, her high heels clicking sharply on the ground. Her voice carried the full authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience. "Jessica, you will clean up this mess on your knees right now, and then you'll go to the kitchen to prepare a new tray. Move it." The humiliation was complete. Jessica lowered her head and began gathering the pieces, pretending not to notice the flashes from Brittany's phone, capturing every moment of her degradation. But as her hands worked mechanically, something strange stirred in her mind. Her eyes scanned every inch of that land with unsettling familiarity. The century-old rose bush in the far corner, the majestic oak shading part of the lawn, the marble fountain built exactly where a small pond once stood. It all awakened confused memories she couldn't quite piece together. "Mom, maybe we should—" Brandon Worthington, Brittany's fiancé, tried to intervene, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. "Quiet, Brandon," Mrs. Eleanor cut him off sharply. "You know nothing about maintaining order in a household. This woman needs to learn her place." As she pretended to focus on cleaning, Jessica noticed something that made her heart race. Half buried in the soft soil near the rosebush was a small blue-painted stone with faded childish drawings. Her fingers recognized it immediately, even after all these years. It was a stone she herself had painted as a child during sunny afternoons in that very garden. Moving carefully, she slipped the stone into her uniform pocket, making sure no one noticed. Her hands trembled no longer from shame, but from an emotion she couldn't name. The party continued with the Worthingtons proudly showing off every corner of the estate to their guests. Mrs. Eleanor made sure to recount how the land had belonged to their family for generations, how their ancestors had built this empire through hard work and dedication. "This manor is over 80 years old," she boasted, gesturing broadly. "My late father-in-law bought this land from a family going bankrupt. It was an excellent deal. We transformed this place into what it is today." Jessica listened to every word as she served the guests, her chest tight with a mix of anger and something that seemed recognition. The stories didn't match the vague memories beginning to surface in her mind like fragments of an old dream. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to hit the like button and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now continuing. The next day, Jessica arrived earlier than usual. She found old Sam, the gardener, watering the plants near the oak tree. The man, who had worked there for over 30 years, had always been kind to her, unlike the family that employed them. "Old Sam," she said, approaching carefully, "do you know the history of this house? I mean, who lived here before the Worthingtons?" The gardener stopped what he was doing and looked at her curiously. His tired eyes seemed to hold many stories. "Why do you ask, child?" Jessica hesitated for a moment, then pulled the small painted stone from her pocket. "I found this yesterday. It feels familiar." Old Sam's eyes widened. He took the stone with trembling hands and examined it closely. "Good heavens," he murmured. "Where did you find this?" "Near the rose bush. Why? Do you recognize it? Child, I remember this stone. A little girl used to play here, painting little stones like this. That was a long time ago, over 25 years. She lived here with her grandmother. Jessica's heart raced. What do you mean she lived here? The former owner was Mrs. Margaret Thompson, a very kind lady of Arab descent. She had a little granddaughter who loved playing in this garden. But one day, old Sam paused, glancing around nervously. One day what? The family vanished overnight. They said they sold the property and moved far away. But it never made sense to me. Mrs. Margaret loved this house more than anything in life. Jessica felt the world spin around her. What was the granddaughter's name? Jessica, said old Sam, his voice barely a whisper. Her name was Jessica. Tears welled in her eyes. The jumbled memories began to fit together like pieces of a complex puzzle. She vaguely remembered playing in that garden, her grandmother telling stories under the oak tree, painting little stones on hot summer afternoons. Old Sam, I need to know what happened to my grandmother. Before the gardener could answer, Mrs. Eleanor Worthington's voice echoed through the garden. Jessica, what are you doing standing there? Come to the kitchen immediately. Old Sam quickly squeezed Jessica's hand. Be careful, child. This family, they don't like questions about the past. For the rest of the day, Jessica worked mechanically, her mind buzzing with the revelations. When she finally got home to her small studio in Liberty Heights, she went straight to the old trunk, holding the few belongings left from her childhood. Her hands shook as she rummaged through old photographs and yellowed documents. At the bottom of the trunk, she found a worn leather folder she'd never examined closely. Inside were documents she had no idea she possessed. There was an old deed, handwritten letters in Arabic and English, and photographs of the Worthington Manor, but from an earlier time when it was still called the Thompson Estate. One photo showed a little girl playing in the garden, and the face staring back was undeniably her own, just 25 years younger. Jessica stayed up all night studying every document. By morning, she had made a decision that would change her life forever. She arrived at the Worthington Manor and went straight to find Mrs. Eleanor in the living room. Mrs. Eleanor, I need to speak with you. If it's about a raise, forget it. After yesterday's embarrassment, it's not about a raise, I'm resigning. Mrs. Eleanor nearly dropped the teacup she was holding. Resigning? What do you mean? You can't just... Yes, I can. And I will. Jessica pulled the already written notice from her pocket. It's all here. The matriarch turned red with anger. You ungrateful girl, after all we've done for you. Where will you find another decent job? Maybe I won't need to, Jessica replied calmly, and walked out of the house before Mrs. Eleanor Worthington could react. The following week, Jessica sought out the office of attorney Robert Miller, a real estate lawyer who practiced downtown. The middle-aged man examined the documents she brought with growing interest. Where did you get these papers? He asked, adjusting his glasses. They were my grandmother's. I kept them without really knowing what they were. Attorney Miller picked up a magnifying glass and studied the signatures and stamps more closely. These documents appear authentic, and if they are, you have here the original deed to the property currently known as Worthington Manor. Does that mean? It means you may be the rightful owner of that land. But I must warn you, taking on a family as powerful as the Worthingtons won't be easy. They have influence, money, and plenty of important connections. Jessica thought of the humiliations she had endured, the way Mrs. Eleanor spoke about people like her. Attorney, I don't want to fight with anyone, I just want the truth. Then let's find the truth. But first, I need to check some records at the county office. While Attorney Miller worked on the legal aspects, Jessica decided to investigate on her own. She returned to the neighborhood where she grew up and sought out Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly neighbor who had known her family for decades. The white-haired woman welcomed her with tears in her eyes. Jessica, my dear, it's been so long. Come in, come in. Come, I want to hear all about your life. Sitting in the simple but cozy living room, Jessica shared her discovery. Mrs. Jenkins listened with growing attention, shaking her head. I knew this would come to light one day, she finally said. Your grandmother Margaret was my dearest friend. When you both disappeared like that... What exactly happened? I barely remember anything. You were so young, just 5 years old. Your grandmother was very ill, heart trouble. One day, some men showed up at her house saying there were unpaid debts, that the property would be sold to settle back taxes. Mrs. Jenkins poured some chamomile tea and continued. Your grandmother was desperate. She tried to explain there were no debts, that all the paperwork was in order, but the men insisted. They said if she didn't sign the sale voluntarily, she'd lose everything anyway and still be left with debts. And she signed? She did, but I saw her crying. She kept saying something was wrong, that someone wanted to steal the inheritance she meant to leave you. After the sale, they moved you both to a tiny apartment downtown. Your grandmother grew even sicker from the heartbreak. Jessica felt tears streaming down her face. And then? Your grandmother passed a few months later. You went to live with a distant aunt in another state. I lost touch. I always wondered what became of you. My great-aunt raised me until I was 15. After she passed too, I was on my own. I never really knew my own story. Mrs. Jenkins took Jessica's hands in hers. My dear, your grandmother always said that house had been in your family for generations. Your great-grandfather built it with his own hands. She would never have sold it willingly. Armed with this knowledge, Jessica returned to Attorney Miller's office. The lawyer had uncovered disturbing details in the public records. The signatures on the sale documents don't match, he said gravely. I compared it with other documents signed by your grandmother, and there are clear discrepancies in the handwriting. That means, it means they possibly forged her signature, but proving it after all this time will be complicated. Jessica clenched her fists. Attorney, I want you to investigate everything. I want to know exactly how the Worthingtons got our estate. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. As Attorney Miller deepened his legal investigations, Jessica decided to return to the estate one last time to find old Sam. She arrived early in the morning, knowing the family would still be asleep. The gardener was trimming the rose bushes, the same work he'd done for decades. When he saw Jessica, his eyes lit up. It's so good you came back, child. I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. Old Sam, I need you to tell me everything you remember about when my grandmother lost the estate. The elderly man nervously glanced at the manor's windows. It's dangerous to talk about this here. Then let's talk somewhere else. They met later at a small diner near the estate. Old Sam seemed burdened, as if carrying a weight for years. Jessica, I saw things I should have never seen, he began, nervously stirring his coffee. Back when the sale happened, I was younger, had only worked at the estate a few years. Mrs. Margaret was always so kind to me. What did you see? I saw some men come to the estate several times. They weren't lawyers or decent folk. They seemed, how can I put it, like thugs. They pressured your grandmother, shouted at her. Jessica felt anger rising in her chest. And then, after the sale, the Worthington family moved in very quickly. Too quickly, like they already knew the estate would be available. Are you saying they planned it all? Old Sam sighed deeply. I can't say for sure, but Mr. Harold Worthington, Mrs. Eleanor's father, was a very ambitious man. He'd wanted that land for years, knew it was one of the best locations in the neighborhood. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Who'd believe a simple gardener against a powerful family? Besides, I needed the job. I have a family to support. Jessica understood his dilemma. But now you're back. And if you need my testimony to get justice, you can count on me. This conversation gave Jessica the courage she needed for the next step. Attorney Miller had secured a hearing at the Property Records Office to examine all documents related to the estate. On the scheduled day, Jessica arrived accompanied by her lawyer. To her surprise, the entire Worthington family was there. Mrs. Eleanor, her husband Richard, Brittany, and Brandon. What's this former employee doing here? Brittany asked disdainfully. I have as much right as you to be in a public place, Jessica replied calmly. Mrs. Eleanor stepped forward with a threatening glare. I hope you're not planning to cause trouble. We know how to deal with people who try to blackmail us. I'm not blackmailing anyone, just seeking the truth. The clerk, Mr. Franklin, called for order. Quiet, please. We'll examine the documents chronologically. For the next 2 hours, Mr. Franklin and Attorney Miller compared deeds, stamps, signatures, and dates. The tension in the room was palpable. There are some irregularities that need investigation, Mr. Franklin finally said. I'll need to request a handwriting analysis. Mrs. Eleanor visibly tensed. What irregularities? Our family has owned this property for over 20 years. That's exactly what we're verifying, ma'am. As they left the office, Richard Worthington discreetly approached Jessica. Jessica, we don't want any trouble. How much do you want to forget this whole thing? The offer left her outraged. I'm not for sale, Mr. Worthington. Everyone has a price, $50,000, $100,000. My dignity isn't for sale, Richard insisted. You don't know who you're dealing with. My family has influence. We can make your life very difficult. Or you could just accept the truth. That night, Jessica received an unexpected call. It was Brandon, Brittany's fiancé. Jessica, can we talk? It's important. They met at a cafe in Greenwich Village. Brandon seemed troubled, nothing like the confident young man she knew. I've started questioning some things about Brittany's family, he said bluntly. Why come to me? Because I saw how they treated you at the party, and now with all this happening, I'm starting to doubt a lot of the stories they've told me. Jessica studied him carefully. What do you want from me? The truth. If you really have a rightful claim to that property, I need to know. I can't marry into a dishonest family. What if I prove they stole my inheritance? Brandon hesitated for a moment. Then I'll call off the wedding. This conversation revealed to Jessica that there were cracks in the seemingly unshakable Worthington family. The next day, she got an urgent call from Attorney Miller. Jessica, you need to come to my office right away. I've found something important. At the office, the lawyer showed documents he had obtained through contacts in the judiciary. I managed to locate the notary who recorded the original sale of your home. He retired 10 years ago, but he's still alive, and he wants to talk to us. Mr. Walter Bennett, the former notary, welcomed them into his modest home on the north side of the city. The nearly 80-year-old man seemed to carry a heavy burden. I've waited years for someone to ask these questions, he said, gesturing to chairs on the porch. Mr. Bennett, do you remember recording the sale of the Thompson estate to the Worthingtons? How could I forget? It was the only illegal act I committed in my entire career. His hands trembled slightly. They pressured me, threatened my family, my practice. I was young, had small children. Jessica's heart raced. Are you saying you falsified the documents? I didn't forge them, but I recorded them knowing the signature wasn't authentic. Your grandmother would never have sold that house willingly. Why speak up now? Because I'm old, nearing the end. I don't want to take this guilt to my grave. Attorney Miller took detailed notes of the testimony. Mr. Bennett, would you be willing to testify officially? I will. It's the only way to make things right. With this explosive confession, Attorney Miller immediately filed a lawsuit to nullify the sale. The news spread quickly through the Worthingtons' social circles. Mrs. Eleanor Worthington was furious when she learned about the lawsuit. She tried to use her influence to pressure the judge, but times had changed. The courts were stricter now about corruption and fraud. In desperation, she confronted Jessica one last time. She arrived at the small apartment in Liberty Heights with what she considered an irresistible offer. $500,000, she said without preamble when Jessica opened the door. Cash, up front. You drop everything and never bother my family again. Jessica stared at her for a long moment. Mrs. Worthington, do you really think this is about money? Everything in life is about money. For you, maybe. For me, it's about justice. Justice? Mrs. Worthington laughed bitterly. You want justice? Your family was poor, in debt. We turned that property into something valuable. With the money you stole from my grandmother. We proved she couldn't manage the estate. It was better off with us. Jessica shut the door in the matriarch's face. There was nothing left to discuss. The lawsuit gained media attention when it leaked that a former housekeeper was claiming one of the most valuable properties in New York City. The newspapers portrayed the case as a David and Goliath battle. During this time, Jessica discovered she wasn't alone. Other longtime neighbors began reaching out to her with information about irregularities involving the Worthington family. Mrs. Wilson, who had lived on the street for 50 years, revealed that the Worthingtons had acquired multiple properties in the same suspicious manner. They had a scheme, she explained. They'd identify valuable properties owned by elderly or financially struggling owners, then create situations to force a sale. What do you mean, create situations? Suddenly appearing overdue taxes, fake debts, psychological pressure. It always worked. These revelations broadened the investigation. The district attorney's office took interest in the case and opened an inquiry to look into other possible frauds. The pressure on the Worthington family intensified when Brandon made the decision he had promised. He publicly broke off his engagement to Brittany, declaring he couldn't associate himself with dishonest practices. "You're insane," Brittany shouted during their argument in the Manor's garden, "over some random maid." "She's not just any maid, she's the rightful owner of this house. Even if she is, so what? My family invested a fortune here." "Stolen money, Brittany, stolen money." The broken engagement was the last straw. Richard Worthington, who had until then supported his wife, began questioning the wisdom of continuing the fight. "Eleanor, maybe we should negotiate," he said during a tense conversation in the living room. "This situation is spiraling out of control. I will never humiliate myself before a maid. She's not our maid anymore, and apparently she never should have been." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers tremendously. Now, back to the story. The situation reached a boiling point when Attorney Miller obtained a court order to examine other documents kept at the Worthington Manor. Jessica accompanied the officers during the search. "You have no right to rummage through our home," protested Mrs. Eleanor Worthington. "We do, ma'am. It's a court order," the officer calmly replied. During the search, they found an old safe buried in the garden, exactly where the painted cobblestone had indicated years earlier. Inside the safe were more documents confirming the Thompson family's original ownership. There were also handwritten letters from Margaret to Jessica, written shortly before her departure. In one, her grandmother explained she had hidden the original documents in case something happened. "My dear granddaughter," one letter read, "if you're reading this, it means you've discovered the truth about our home. I always knew you'd return one day to claim what's rightfully yours." Jessica wept as she read the words of the grandmother she had loved so dearly. Finally, she understood why she'd always felt strange working in that house. It was her own home she'd been cleaning. With the new evidence, the lawsuit accelerated. The judge scheduled a final hearing to hear all parties and make a definitive ruling. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. The press had turned the case into a symbol of the struggle between rich and poor, between justice and impunity. Jessica arrived with Attorney Miller, Old Sam, Mrs. Jenkins, and Mr. Walter Bennett. On the other side, the Worthington family appeared with a team of 5 expensive lawyers. For 3 hours, each side presented their evidence. The Worthingtons' lawyers tried to challenge the authenticity of the documents found in the safe, but the handwriting analysis was conclusive. Mr. Walter Bennett's testimony was devastating. He confessed in detail how he had been pressured to file fraudulent documents. "I made a terrible mistake," he told the judge, "but I can no longer live with this weight on my conscience." Old Sam confirmed witnessing the psychological pressure exerted on Mrs. Margaret Thompson. Mrs. Jenkins testified about her friend's sadness after losing the house. When it was Jessica's turn to speak, she addressed the judge directly with a firm voice. "Your Honor, I do not seek revenge. I only seek recognition of a right that was stolen from me when I was just a helpless child." "And what would your intention be if the property is recognized as yours?" asked the judge. "I plan to turn part of it into a community center for underprivileged children. I want that garden, which witnessed my humiliation, to become a symbol of hope." The response drew murmurs of approval from the audience. The Worthingtons' lawyers made one last desperate effort, offering compensation instead of returning the property. But it was too late. After a 2-hour deliberation, the judge returned with his decision. Considering all the evidence presented, especially the confession of the former notary and the documents found in the safe, I declare the sale of the property known as Worthington Manor null and void. The true owner is Miss Jessica Thompson, the rightful heir of Margaret Thompson." The courtroom erupted in applause. Jessica wept as she embraced Attorney Miller and her supporters. Mrs. Eleanor Worthington fainted upon hearing the verdict and had to be carried out by court security. In the following days, the press covered every detail of the property transfer. The Worthington family was given 30 days to vacate the house. During that time, something unexpected happened. Brittany sought Jessica for a private conversation. "I came to ask for forgiveness," she said, her eyes red from crying. "I have no excuse for how I treated you." Jessica received her in the garden she now knew was hers. "Why did you decide to come to me?" "Because I lost Brandon. Because I discovered my family built an entire life based on lies. Because I saw how dignified you were throughout this process, even when we were cruel." "And what do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just wanted you to know that not all of us are like my mother." Jessica studied the face of the young woman who had humiliated her at the party. She saw sincerity there, and also deep pain. "Brittany, you're still young. You can choose to be different from your family." "How can I do that?" "Start by acknowledging the mistakes, then decide not to repeat them." The conversation planted a seed of change in Brittany. In the following months, she would distance herself from her family and begin working at a non-profit organization helping vulnerable families. Richard Worthington approached Jessica a few days before the final deadline to leave the house. "Jessica, I'd like to propose an arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" "My wife is deeply shaken. This house is all she's known for 20 years. Would it be possible for her to continue living here? We'd pay rent, of course." Jessica was surprised by the request. "Mr. Richard, after everything that happened, I know it's a lot to ask, but Eleanor is unwell. The shock of losing the house has affected her mental health." "And you? Do you agree with everything your family did?" Richard lowered his head. "No, I always knew something was wrong about how we obtained this property, but it was easier not to ask questions. Honesty, finally. So, is there any possibility?" Jessica thought carefully before answering. "There is, but with conditions." "What conditions?" "First, Mrs. Eleanor must apologize to me publicly. Second, part of the garden will be transformed into the community center I promised. Third, you will financially support the project." Richard considered the conditions. "I'll talk to my wife." The conversation between Richard and Eleanor was stormy. The matriarch flatly refused to apologize to a former maid. "I'd rather live on the streets," she shouted. "Then that's what we'll do," Richard replied firmly, "because I won't finance your arrogance any longer." Her husband's threat made Eleanor reconsider. For the first time in her life, she faced the real possibility of losing everything. On the final day of the deadline, she appeared at the doorstep accompanied by Richard. Jessica greeted her in the garden near the marble fountain. I've come to apologize," Eleanor said with visible difficulty. "I can't hear you properly." Eleanor took a deep breath and spoke louder. "I apologize for the humiliations I caused. I apologize for living in your home as if it were mine. I apologize for treating you as inferior when I was the one who was wrong." Jessica observed her for a long moment. "I accept your apology, and I accept you continuing to live here under the conditions I've set." The unusual agreement made national news. Many criticized Jessica for allowing the Worthingtons to stay in the house, but she stood by her decision. "Revenge builds nothing," she explained to a reporter. "I'd rather build something positive." The community center opened 6 months later. The garden that once belonged exclusively to a wealthy family became a gathering space for children of all social classes. Old Sam was promoted to coordinator of the community garden. Mrs. Jenkins took charge of educational activities. Mr. Walter Bennett volunteered to teach citizenship classes for the youth. Brittany, keeping her promise to change, became a regular volunteer at the center. Brandon, who had broken off their engagement on principle, began visiting the place and gradually grew closer to her again. "She's not the same person anymore," he remarked to Jessica one afternoon in the garden. People can change when they decide to face the truth about themselves. And you two, will you get married again? Maybe. But right now, she needs to find herself first. A year after the court decision, Jessica organized a grand celebration in the garden to mark the community center's first anniversary. Hundreds attended, children in the program, their families, neighbors, supporters. During the event, something touching happened. Mrs. Eleanor approached a group of children playing near the rosebush and began telling them stories. The children listened, enthralled, begging for more. "Who is that lady?" a little girl asked Jessica. "Someone who's learning to be better. She tells stories really well? Yes, she has a lot of life experience." At that moment, Jessica realized Eleanor's transformation was real. The woman who once scorned poor children now embraced them with genuine affection. As the party ended, Eleanor approached Jessica. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For teaching me it's never too late to start over. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even those who don't deserve it. Especially those who don't deserve it." As night fell, Jessica walked alone through the garden she now knew was truly hers. She paused near the oak tree where her grandmother used to tell stories and felt profound peace. The children playing there earlier had left small painted stones scattered across the lawn. Jessica smiled at the sight, remembering the stone she'd found months ago that had started this whole journey. She picked up one of the stones and examined it. It was painted blue, with childish drawings of houses and trees, just as she'd done as a child in that very spot. "Grandma," she murmured, gazing at the stars, "I did it. I brought our home back." A gentle breeze rustled the oak leaves, as if Margaret were whispering her approval. In the following months, the community center gained national recognition. Jessica received awards from human rights organizations and was invited to speak at universities. During one of these talks at Columbia University, a law student asked a question that deeply moved her. "Professor Jessica, don't you feel angry about losing so many years of your life because of an injustice?" Jessica thought carefully before answering. "Angry? I felt plenty of it, but I've learned that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. True justice isn't about revenge. It's about building something better. And if you could go back in time, would you change anything?" "I'd change the injustice, of course, but I wouldn't change what I learned from it. Sometimes our greatest sufferings lead us to our greatest purposes." The audience gave her a standing ovation. In that moment, Jessica fully understood why she had gone through it all. 2 years later, during a special ceremony in the garden, she announced the creation of a foundation to help others in similar situations. "The Margaret Thompson Foundation," she said emotionally, "will assist families who have lost their properties through fraud. No child will ever go through what I did again." Brandon and Brittany, who had married a few months earlier in a simple ceremony at the community center itself, were the first volunteers for the foundation. Old Sam, now over 60, still tended to the garden with the same care as always. Mrs. Jenkins had become a kind of community grandmother, looking after children whose parents worked during the day. Even Richard Worthington found his place in the new arrangement. Using his business experience, he helped struggling families organize their finances and small businesses. Eleanor took longer to find her role, but eventually became responsible for a community library project. Her privileged upbringing had given her access to a refined education, which she now proudly shared. "You know what amazes me the most?" Attorney Robert Miller remarked during a visit to the center. "How you turned an unjust situation into an opportunity to build something greater." "Maybe that was the lesson I needed to learn," Jessica replied. "That our true legacy isn't the properties we own, but the impact we leave behind." The end of the story. Now, tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your sincere thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Jessica made the right choice in forgiving the Worthington family? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like this video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories.